My name is Dr. Tracy Mayne. I'm the Vice President of Medical Affairs at Angion Biomedica. Angion is a late-phase clinical company that is developing drugs for the treatment of acute and chronic organ injury. So our lead compound is ANG-3777. I'll also refer to it as ANG-3777. And we are in phase 3 for the treatment of delayed graft function. We're also in phase 2 for the treatment of cardiac surgery-associated acute kidney injury. Let me talk a little bit about the mechanism of action for ANG-3777. The body has inherent mechanisms for healing injured tissue. Immediately after injury, there is the release of hepatocyte growth factor, or HGF. And that was first explored in the regeneration of liver tissue. And we all know that the liver has tremendous ability to heal after injury. But this mechanism is also present in the kidneys, in the lungs, and in the heart. So immediately after injury, there's a release of HGF, and then within about 24 hours, there's an upregulation of the c-Met receptor on cells of injured tissues. The HGF binds to the c-Met receptor, and it initiates this relatively complex cascade that ultimately results in the inhibition of apoptosis, as well as the stimulation of tissue regeneration. Now, what's interesting is there is a mismatch between the release of the HGF immediately after injury and the upregulation of the c-Met receptor at about 24 hours, and that's where ANG-3777 comes in. It is administered within the first 30 hours after initial injury. And there's also this sort of reciprocal regulation mechanism where when you stimulate that receptor with HGF, it also helps maintain the upregulation of that receptor. So ANG-3777 is also administered 24 and 48 hours after that initial infusion. Our phase 2 trial in DGF differed from many of the other trials, which unfortunately were not successful. So the other trials pre-treated all patients undergoing transplant. For ANG-3777, we're treating patients who show evidence of DGF within that first 30 hours, and we're defining that as oliguria, or the production of less than 50 cc's of urine per hour for 8 consecutive hours. So we're treating patients who already have evidence of DGF versus the other trials that treated all patients, and we know only about 27 to 40% of patients undergoing transplant will have DGF. We also know DGF is mostly concentrated in patients who are receiving deceased donor kidneys. So we have excluded patients who are receiving kidneys from living donors. Our phase 2 trial was stopped early because of efficacy. The primary endpoint was the resolution of oliguria, or the return of the production of 1,200 cc's of urine over a 24-hour period. In the ANG-3777 group, that happened at a median of 4 days versus 20 days in the patients treated with placebo. And in fact, at 28 days, 83% of the patients treated with ANG-3777 had resolution of oliguria versus only 50% of the patients who were treated with placebo. There were a number of other endpoints in the trial that also had positive results. So there was a greater decrease in serum creatinine in the ANG-3777 group versus placebo. There was a greater increase in eGFR. There were significant differences in important AKI biomarkers such as NGAL and C-reactive protein. This all translated also into downstream differences in healthcare resource utilization. There were fewer dialysis days for the patients treated with ANG-3777, and also, on average, they were in the hospital for 4 days less after transplant than placebo-treated patients. There's one other endpoint, and this is a small trial, so I don't want to overemphasize this. But within 1 year, 2 of the grafts failed in the placebo group versus none in the ANG-3777 group. In terms of safety, there were no statistically significant or clinically meaningful differences between ANG-3777 and placebo in terms of adverse events or serious adverse events. We're currently more than halfway through recruitment for our phase 3 trial, and it is very similar to the phase 2 trial in that patients who have significant oliguria within the first 30 hours are randomized to treatment or placebo. But we've changed the primary endpoint to one that we know is very meaningful for clinicians, and so it's number of days on dialysis. And as we all know, once a patient has undergone a transplant, you really don't want to put them back onto dialysis. We also have a trial in acute kidney injury associated with cardiac surgery. We're in phase 2, and in this trial we're looking at patients who are undergoing either CABG and or heart valve repair or replacement who are at high risk for acute kidney injury. So things like insulin-dependent diabetes or congestive heart failure, NYHA class 3 or 4. And again, those patients are being treated after the surgery. And we are looking for either the prevention of AKI or the faster resolution of AKI in those patients who experience AKI. Angion also does have some additional drugs in its pipeline. There's ANG-3777, which is an antifibrotic that we're looking at for the treatment of chronic kidney disease or the much more rare FSGS. And there's also ANG-4271, again for the treatment of chronic kidney disease. And I hope at NKF next year that we'll have some additional data on those molecules as well.